Well, hello, and thank you everybody for coming to my presentation. I'm Greg Radabaugh. I'm on the board of directors of the International Remote Viewing Association. Today's presentation is an introduction to remote viewing. So what I'm going to walk you through today is what is remote viewing and how it evolved and some applications for it. So this is going to be recorded so that we can make it easier to translate for you. And at the end, we will do an experiment and then we'll have time for questions and answers. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get into the presentation. So there you have it, remote viewing, evolution, and applications. And this is the agenda that I'm going to follow for you. As you can see, I'm going to talk about the scientific evidence supporting this remote viewing, how it evolved in the beginning, and more importantly, what are the different types of remote viewing? Because a lot of people think it is just one thing, but it's not. And then I'll walk you through a session that I did so that you can see how controlled remote viewing is done. And then I'll talk about some real world remote viewing applications for you. Quick summary. So first off, what is this beast called remote viewing? This is the definition from the International Remote Viewing Association, and I won't read it to you, but the thing to remember is that it's a protocol. It is a way of disciplining your mind and disciplining the way that you receive information. And what's key to this is that it is testable and repeatable. So I get asked many times, so what's the evidence to support that there is such a thing as remote viewing? And most people don't know that there's over 130 years of scientific studies that demonstrate statistically significant data that supports the existence of remote viewing and extrasensory perception. Dr. Dean Radin has published several books on the available scientific data. Dr. Hal Puthoff and Russell Targ first opened up with MindReach. Scientists look at psychic abilities, which was their attempt to introduce the concept of remote viewing to the skeptical scientific community. And in another example, Dr. Courtney Brown did studies in the science and theory of non-physical perception. The thing I want to point out here is that we in IRVA have, in essence, gone beyond trying to prove the existence of remote viewing. We've done that. Now, what our scientific studies are doing is looking at how do we improve remote viewing? How do we improve the accuracy? How do we improve the depth and breadth of it? And so that brings me to how did this evolve? Well, in the pre-modern era, there was several books like Rene Warcollier talked about experimental telepathy. Alpton Sinclair wrote about mental radio. So as you can see from these books mentioned below, there have been studies and thoughts about what we used to call things like clairvoyance, clairaudience, extrasensory perception, and so on for decades. And this goes beyond the 1900s. We even had people in the 1800s and 1700s looking at this and talking about this. So this has been of interest for a long time. So where did the term remote viewing come from? Well, it was originally coined by the American Society for Psychical Research back in 1971. And what they did initially was they would have subjects describe the weather at distant locations and use people in beaconing experiments. In 1972, Dr. Hal Puthoff was introduced to Ingo Swann, who is very key to the development of the concept of controlled remote viewing. And other subjects came along in time. Russell Targ joined Hal at SRI. They had subjects like Pat Price and Hella Hammond. Uh, so they originally thought about it, called it coordinate remote viewing, and that was developed with Ingo, Hal, and Russ at SRI. And later on, they changed the terminology to control remote viewing because sometimes you were viewing things that weren't at a specific physical coordinate. And they got funding from the CIA to study this extrasensory perception and remote viewing. And in 1975, the Air Force took over funding from CIA under Dale Graff. And then we started going public about the concept of remote viewing in 1976, 1977, when Russ and Hal started publishing the results of their work in professional journals like in IEEE and their book Mind Reach. And in the photos you can see there, that's Hal and Russ and Ingo, and then Hella Hammond down below. And so why was the intelligence community interested in remote viewing in the first place? Well, what drove this is that the intelligence community was getting information back in the late 60s and early 70s that the Russians were doing great studies in what they called controlled offensive behavior and paraphysics, parapsychology. And so the intelligence community rightfully thought, well, if the Russians are doing this and they're investing time and money and resources in this, we probably ought to find out if there's anything in this. And so that resulted in the subsequent contract with HAL and SRI back in 1972. So it wasn't something that just came out of the blue. There was a driving force behind this as to what's going on, and we better find something out. And so in the modern era, after Hal and Russ and Ingo developed the concept of controlled remote viewing, the first Army unit stood up in 1977 under various and different cover names, Gondola Wish, Girl Flame, and you'll hear others like Stargate and Sunstreak. And you can see listed here the known Army unit members, most of whom are now out in public. There are still members of the programs that remain anonymous, and we respect that anonymity. So they started training back in 1977. Ingo Swan did most of the training of the initial members. And then in 1979, the unit went operational. And unfortunately, in 1980, the Air Force, which had a separate program, canceled, and Dale Graff moved to DIA. And in 1985, due to, shall we say, political pressures within Washington, D.C., the program moved to DIA, and that's where it became Sunstreak and Stargate. And they operated for another 9 years. And then the program was moved to CIA with the purpose of essentially shutting down the program. And that's when the first public disclosure of the program begins back in 1995 and through 1998. First big book was Jim Schnabel's book that described the development and establishment of the program. And then in 1999, the first control remote viewing conference was held in Alamogordo, New Mexico, and that's where the International Remote Viewing Association was established. And there are the founding members. You can see Hal Puthoff, Dave Hathcock, who funded the beginning of IRVA, John Alexander in the back, Lynn Buchanan, Russell Targ and Stephen Schwartz sitting in the front, Paul Smith behind them, along with Skip Atwater, Angela Thompson-Smith, and then Marcello Truzzi. The key thing about Marcello was that the board specifically invited Marcello to be part of it because he was a renowned scientist and skeptic. And so they wanted his expertise to make sure that the studies that they did remained true to scientific rigor and experimental protocols. And therefore, people couldn't accuse the association of, pulling the wool over their eyes and doing things and claiming that it exists when it was not in proper protocols for scientific study. Now, the research continues on today. IRVA has sponsored their own research unit in 2020, and they're doing it to, again, as I said earlier, press the boundaries of research beyond the establishment that it exists, but how do we make it better? How do we increase the accuracy? How do we increase the throughput of the data that we get? Uh, Deborah Katz, the current president of IRVA, along with Patrizio Tresoldi, did meta-analysis of studies over the past 50 years. And that's available. And there have been multiple remote viewing peer-reviewed studies in various professional journals. And the interesting thing that we're doing now in the 21st century is that we're exploring the use of artificial intelligence as a support to control remote viewing by using an AI agent as a monitor during sessions. And you can go online with the IRVA YouTube channel and see efforts of various viewers using AI as a monitor to help them in their sessions. And so that brings me to, okay, is controlled remote viewing the be all and end all of what's called remote viewing? And there are different approaches to this protocol. And remember, it's a protocol for disciplining yourself and obtaining the information to be able to report it to the persons of interest. So you have the initial controlled remote viewing. The military unit, and Angela Ford did something called extended remote viewing. Marty Rosenblatt and Lori Williams and Deborah Katz have been working on associative remote viewing. And Ed Dames developed what he called technical remote viewing. Courtney Brown, the Farsight Institute, developed scientific remote viewing. Prudence Calabrese has done transdimensional systems remote viewing. And then the Hawaiian Remote Viewers Guild under Glenn Wheaton came up with their own protocol. So different names, the purpose is the same. How do you obtain non-local information under a protocol so that you can report it to the people that task it? And so that brings me to, what does a remote viewing session look like? Well, it has a structure, and it's an orderly process of proceeding from the general to the specific and accessing what we call the signal line. And in remote viewing, that is the stream of data that we access to obtain information about the target. And it follows a formal 6-stage procedure. And for some sessions, like for example, operational, sometimes we don't need the stage 6 because the data that we require to answer the tasking is enough before we go into modeling. And so it begins with a tasking linked to a target designator. And that target designator can be anything. It can be a random mix of letters and numbers. It can be a word. And that's why this evolved from coordinates originally under Ingo Swann and SRI, because the skeptics were saying, well, anybody can memorize the globe. And, you give them a coordinate and they can generalize, okay, that's in this area, therefore I can memorize what the physical location looks like. And so that led them to developing, okay, random number of letters and numbers. And that way there is no way for the viewer to gather from that the actual location of the target by memorizing maps and coordinates and so on. And it also means that you can use the target designator to use things like words and phrases as the target, or a person as a target, or an event as a target, not a physical location. And so that brings me to, well, how do you train for these? And so you have what are called training sessions where the tasker and the instructor know what the target is, and they help the student go through the process and the protocol to be able to understand how to apply the protocol and what does the signal line look like and feel like in their mind. Then you have operational targets, and the key to both training and operational is you're getting feedback on what did you get from results. And then you have esoteric targets, which, yes, you can target that, but there's no way to get feedback for it. An example of that would be UAPs. So the remote viewing target is a UAP. How do you get feedback for that when we're still trying to study and figure out what they are to begin with? And so again, I'll underline the critical factor for remote viewing and growing as a viewer is getting that feedback. So we start with stage one, and it sets the foundation for the rest of the stages. And it consists of the ideogram and the AB construct. And as you see down below, this is a session I did back in 2019. And you start off with a heading on the page of, your name, or in many cases, your viewer number, date, time, what kind of target is it? Is it operational, training, esoteric, and who's the monitor? And then you see PI for personal inclemencies. That a viewer gets that out of the way of, yeah, I feel kind of crappy today, but I still have to do the target, or I'm worried about something. And so you write that down, and in essence clears the mental buffers. And then AV advanced visuals. So as you see the target ID, sometimes you'll get a flash, and you write that down because that may or may not be the target. And then you can see off to the left, there's the target ID, and then you see this squiggle. That's my ideogram, and that was my spontaneous representation of when I got the target, this is what I saw. And then you start getting, what's the feeling and motion of the ideogram? So you'll take your pen or your pencil or whatever writing implement, if you're doing this electronically, your stylus, and you'll start just kind of probing the ideogram. And you'll start getting the sensations of, okay, I'm feeling it's a cross, I'm getting a slide up, down. And while you're doing this, you're also getting initial, what we call gestalts of, overall information from the target. So as you probe, you're getting things like, okay, I'm getting a landscape. I'm getting that there are biologicals at the site. I'm getting that there are things at the site that are man-made. And that helps you get into the next stage of the session, which is stage two. And now you're starting to get physical sensory input from the target. And so this centers around your five senses. So you're getting things that are related to sight, to smell, to taste, to sound, to touch. And the object here is describe. Don't identify, describe. And you can include tactile sensations like temperature, energetic, like you're feeling some sort of radiation, and just list them. You just go down as they come in. And as you're going through these, the signal line, in essence, the data stream that you're getting starts to get more and more. As we say, the aperture widens. And then as you get to the end of stage two, you'll start getting feelings about the target itself, about dimensional aspects of it. you're starting to see that, okay, it's a physical location. So I'm starting to see things that are like diagonal or horizontal, or I'm starting to get to a point where I get kind of an aesthetic impact of the target itself. For a sample target might be the Grand Canyon. And your aesthetic impact is you're standing at the edge of a cliff overlooking the Grand Canyon. You get, wow, that's really big. So you get this kind of emotional wow feeling to it. So as you can see, my aesthetic impact was, okay, this was a living place and there were lots of energy here. And that started me into sketching, and that takes you into stage three. And as you can see below, this was my initial sketch of the target area. And now I get into stage four, and that's where I'm querying the signal line about, okay, give me some things more about the target that I'm looking at or sensing. And so I get more additional sensory input. The D stands for dimensionals. Am I getting a aesthetic impact? Is there an emotional impact to me? Is there something very tangible about the site that I can describe? Are there intangible things that I get? Uh, there is this concept called analytic overlay and an AOL. And what that is that as you're getting this information through your conscious mind is trying to identify it, to categorize it, to label it. So for example, the information you might be getting is the color red, round, it's flexible, and immediately your brain goes, oh, it's a red rubber ball. Because through evolution, our brains were taught to categorize information very quickly as a threat response, because that's how we stayed alive. So that's one of the benefits of the protocol is you're working past that conscious brain effort to categorize everything. And so as you get data, you'll go, oh, it's a stadium. That's an analytic overlay. So you write that down to the side. And again, by putting this information down physically, you're clearing your mental buffers so more information can come through. And so you set that to the side. The interesting thing is that analytic overlay, in many cases, actually has a relationship to the target, but you have to dig for it. And so there are some things that what we call analytic overlay the signal line to where, yeah, it's directly related to the signal line, but it's still kind of a identification that you're trying that you're trying to get away from. So you see on my page here, my analytic overlay related to the signal line is it's very old, center of power, and so on. So you use the stage four matrix to be able to help you discipline yourself into what am I getting from the target and putting it down and clearing the buffers. And you may do several pages of these stage four matrices. And then there's stage five. And this is different from the previous stages because in accessing this signal line, you are getting more data than you realize. And a lot of that resides in your subconscious. So in stage five, what you're doing is you are accessing the data that is already stored in your mind. And so we do this, you pick something from your stage four matrix that you think, I need more data on this. And so as you can see from my session, I thought, well, there's something religious about this. So I need to dig into my mind and find out, why did I get the impression of religion? So the first column is objects and emanations, and I get stones and bones too. And then what sort of attributes and emanations am I getting from this data I already have? And as you can see, I went through and I went down. I got old, I got gods, I've got power. And then what kind of subjects am I getting emanating from this data? And you can see sacrifice and death and prayer. And then what kind of topics does this data tell me that is there? And you can read down the list. So this is a way of formally getting through and asking your mind, tell me more about the data you already have. And at this point, you're getting a really good impression of what's the target. And then that takes you to stage 6. And in stage 6, you actually do a physical model of the target. And here you have a viewer making a physical model of the Titanic. And the target is the Titanic. And to show you how really good stage 6 can be, Tom McNear's stage 6 is the model of nuclear power plant in South Carolina. Notice how closely Tom got it to the actual target site. That's how good you can do at remote viewing. But as I had said earlier, on some operational targets, like a missing person, you will probably get enough information where you don't need to physically model the target site. And so you go from there into what's called the summary. And so the summary, the viewer writes down description that they have of the target. And you can see I started off, the target is perceived to be a human settlement. Not that it is a human settlement, it's just that is my perception of the data. And I go through and I just describe what I perceived about the target. And this goes to the analyst or the person levying the targeting instruction, the tasking. And if you have more than one viewer, they will collate all this data and all these summaries, and they will develop a report that goes to the person requesting the tasking and provide them the data. So that's basically what a controlled remote viewing session looks like. So one of the things to understand about remote viewing is that time is important because we've discovered through remote viewing, time is very malleable. So when you are providing a tasking to a viewer, it's important to put intent into the tasking as to what time period do you want the viewer to look at. So a great example is Pat Price, who you see pictured above in the right. He was tasked with a viewing that turned out to be a swimming pool in Palo Alto, California. The city map of the target location is on the left. There's Pat's drawing on the right. The weird thing is that Pat included these large storage tanks at the site, which weren't there in 1973. So years later, somebody discovers that in 1913, yes, there were storage tanks at the site. So Pat had gone back to 1913 to describe the target. So again, that highlights you need to be very clear as to what time period you need the viewer to look at, because a viewer will tend to go to where the target is most numinous, most energetic. And that's something that we use in training as an example to get a viewer to understand you answer the tasking, not what's energetic about the site in some cases. So a good example of a training target would be describe Pearl Harbor on December 6, 1941. And a student will naturally be attracted to what happened on December 7th, 1941, because a lot of energy and activity happened. But no, you need to discipline them to go, show me Honolulu Harbor in 1941 on December 6th when everything was peaceful and quiet. So you have to train yourself to go to the tasking, and it's in the target's in the tasking rather than the shiny object that's over here. And so that leads me to, okay, I understand the protocol, I understand the concepts. What do I do with this? Well, the military was very interested in it as a means of collecting intelligence, and they classified it as human intelligence or HUMINT. And so you can see the data collection categories here and the various examples. Everything by I need to understand what's the layout of a building that a hostage is located in when I don't have access to the plans. What are some future adversary weapon systems that might be coming? Because again, time is malleable and you can go forward as well as back. Uh, where can I find the target? Uh, Great example is Dale Graff had tasked his Air Force unit in finding a crashed Soviet aircraft in Africa. Uh, what are the conditions at a target? Uh, the Army unit was able to describe the hostage conditions for the Iranian hostages taken in 1979 after they were captured. And in, things like counterintelligence. Where are the spies? Describe the spies. So here's an example of a remote viewing project from the past. And the tasking was, what's inside Building 402 at Severin Shipyard in the Soviet Union? Well, Joe McMoneagle, who many of us view as the Tiger Woods of remote viewing, was given the task. And so his first session was, okay, here's the target area. And you can see his drawing on the right, and there's an overhead shot of the building 402. And yeah, that's pretty good match. So he described what's inside the building. And you can see he laid out the different halls that you can see here and various ships. And so, yeah, that's a pretty good match. And then he described the ships they were building. And here's where it got interesting because he described that the Soviets were building a submarine and that the missile tubes for this missile submarine were in front of the conning tower. And our naval experts thought that was ridiculous because everybody knows the conning tower goes in front of the missile tubes like they do on US subs. Well, guess what? The ship finally emerged from the hull, and the Typhoon had all of its missile tubes in front of the sail, just like Joe McMoneagle had described. And so here's the assessment. You can see Joe got it pretty right. Here's another application, and you can see these in the CI archives that are online of the remote viewing program. So this was Sun Street Project 8709, which is, could Russia use remote viewing to identify our stealth programs? And so here's a viewer's effort at what would a stealth aircraft look like? Pretty close. Of course, if you go back and you look at some of the other efforts, you'll see that there were other viewers and other drawings that weren't even close to this. So this is not an amazing, aha, we're right all the time. But there are times when we are right. And then I talked about human intelligence and counterintelligence. In 1987, viewers were asked to describe a mole in the US intelligence community. And this is what they described. And that is Aldrich Ames, Rick Ames, down to a T. I have not been able to confirm if this data was used in the investigation, but this is an example of remote viewers given a task of identify a mole, and this is the data they came up with that was spot on. So outside of intelligence, which is vital to a national interest, what else can I use remote viewing for? Well, scientific exploration. Back in 1973, Ingo Swann remote viewed Jupiter, and you can see his description there to include a ring around Jupiter, which scientists at the time poo-pooed because they said, no, Saturn's the only planet that has a ring, till Voyager 1 went by and took a photograph, and there you go. And then in 2012, Hitomi Akamatsu was asked to remote view what does a Higgs boson particle look like. And you can see the CERN visualization on the right that the scientists produced after they found the Higgs boson particle in 2012. So not exact, but not bad. Archaeology is a great use of remote viewing. Stephen Schwartz made great use of remote viewing in his archaeological studies. The Alexandria Project, which he's written about in 1979, used remote viewing to find the lost city of Alexandria. He used remote viewing again in Caravel to find the city underwater. The session that I did was for Dr. Angela Thompson Smith for an archaeological excavation in Sardinia in 2019. And the feedback that we got was, yes, we were right on. Resource location. Joe McMonagle has been tasked in the past to locate oil and gas deposits. We asked Joe, did you get feedback on this? And his response was, well, I didn't get feedback, but they keep sending me checks. So I guess that's a form of feedback. And then historical mysteries. Angela Thompson Smith's Nevada Remote Viewing Group had a tasking in 2014 to look at what happened to Amelia Earhart. And a photograph that came to light later on showed what appeared to be Western individuals uh, located on an island controlled by the Japanese, and what appeared to be an aircraft on a barge. And the remote viewers said that they both had survived and were picked up by the Japanese and taken by the boat to the Mariana Islands, and then were sent to Saipan in prison, and that they passed away in prison on Saipan. Is this confirmed? No, but there's more data coming up that tends to support the remote viewers. So we'll just have to wait and see what the future brings as far as actual data. And one place that you'll probably be very familiar with is in criminal justice. Pam Coronado is known as the psychic detective. She has undertaken numerous cases and was on the TV show Sensing Murder. If you get a chance, go online and look up those programs, and you'll see some fascinating stuff that she did in helping the police in solving these cases. Lynn Buchanan, at one point, had what was called an assigned witness program. He had the police come to him and say, is there anything remote viewing can do for them? And he said, well, yeah, I can assign a witness to the crime. And they asked, what do you mean? And he said, well, I can assign viewers to look at the time and place of the crime and describe what happened. So it was in basically assigning a witness to the crime in progress. And the data that he was able to gather from that program were valuable to the police. And then I helped Dr. Angela Thompson Smith in 2006 on a murder case that was tasked by Robert Knight Some of you might know Robert. He is very famous for being the photographer to the rock stars, going all the way back to the 1960s to today. Robert has photographed everybody from Jimi Hendrix to Kiss to Led Zeppelin to you name it. Well, he had a friend of his who was a disc jockey in Denver go missing and was found dead off the coast of California. And so he asked the remote viewers to help identify who did it. And the data that we gathered were enabled the police to pursue leads and find the killer. So one thing I really want to emphasize here is that remote viewers and other psychics do not solve crimes. The police solve the crimes. We provide data and information that allows them to refine their investigation and narrow down suspects to actually apprehend the guilty. So, no, we don't solve the crimes, the police do. We are an adjunct and a helper. They're the ones that do the hard work. And along the lines of criminal cases, there is humanitarian and missing persons. So in 2019, we were tasked to find a missing hiker in the German Alps. The picture you see there is Chris Freiheit, who went missing, and we were asked to locate him. And as you can see below, there's a sketch of where the viewers perceived the location to be of the hiker and marked on the maps of where we thought the hiker was. And you can see below, we received these from the people searching for the hiker. Yes, this is where the hiker was located, and this is what the location looked like. And where they found Chris matched what we described, and his condition matched what we described. And they were able to find him 24 hours after we provided the data. Other examples that we've done in 2013, when Haiti had the massive earthquake, we were tasked to find survivors or bodies in a hotel where aid workers were staying. We were able to locate the bodies, and the searchers were able to go in and pinpoint them and pull them out. And last year, we were tasked to help support a human trafficking case, and we were able to identify the traffickers and their location. And unfortunately, we were warned off because somehow the traffickers found that the searchers were using remote viewers, and they said they would hunt us down and take us out if we pursued it. So there can be some, shall we say, unexpected consequences from your remote viewing activities. And Pam Coronado, of course, has worked multiple missing person cases. So if you get a chance to attend any of Pam's sessions online or go to her website, and she has many training courses, as do many of the people involved in the remote viewing community, please do so. She's an amazing instructor. And then you can actually use remote viewing for medical assessments. Gail Husick used remote viewing to do a study of autism. And she was able to discern that the autistic twins who were unable to communicate with their parents were actually able to communicate through remote viewing. And this made the parents feel, I guess, so much better because they knew the children understood them even though they couldn't communicate. And then Lynn Buchanan has developed various medical diagnosis protocols to help guide medical professionals in the treatment of medical conditions. So again, we're using this to aid professionals in doing their jobs. We're not curing diseases. We're providing information through remote viewing to help professionals. And then again, once more time, I'll say time is malleable. You can do precognition. Daz Smith and Dick Allgaier are remote viewing future events. A recent example is Dick, who's down there with the handsome mustache on the left, and Daz Smith up on the right. Dick was doing an earthquake prediction back in March, and a few days later, there was a devastating earthquake in Myanmar, and the locations matched what Dick had predicted, as you can see in his drawing. And then our very own Luciano Arruda is practicing using remote viewing in different business applications. One example is in realtor sales support. So a realtor might present a property and a list of prospective clients and say, which clients should I concentrate on? And that cuts down the amount of time and effort a realtor has to put into pursuing a sale of a property. These are efforts associated under what we would call associated remote viewing. And so what's that? Well, again, that's looking into the future. And there are some outstanding books on this written by Lori Williams, Deborah Lynn Katz, Marty Rosenblatt. And you can use this in things like sporting events. Which team will win? Which horse will win place in show? In gambling, will a roulette ball fall in red or black? Marty does two conferences a year on associative remote viewing, and you actually practice ARV using online gambling sites. And we have done things like pick which color horse will win place in show. Will the roulette wheel fall on red and black? And he does actual betting with real money. And so far, we've made him money, so that's worked out. And Russell Tark was trying out associative remote viewing, and there's Russ down at the bottom. And he did predictions on the silver market. Will it go up? Will it go down? And Russell and his viewers made money. And you can use it to look at various startups and go, will they succeed or not? Or for personal decisions like, should I buy this particular house or not? Will I get a job or not? So again, the interesting thing about associative remote viewing is that you are in essence viewing your future feedback. So you have images that are associated with the outcome. So for example, the silver market, will it go up? Will it go down? Well, there would be an image for going up and an image selected for it going down. And you give, okay, will the silver market go up or down on this date? So you're anchoring it in time and place. And then the viewers view which photo will they be shown in their feedback as being the correct one. So this is different from controlled remote viewing to where you're actually viewing the target, whereas in associative remote viewing, you're viewing your feedback in the future of being shown, yes, this is the photo that was associated with the correct outcome. And there are ways that you can kind of help this along through your different senses. So some viewers have done associative remote viewing where they have been shown the correct photo and they will actually do things like eat a chocolate chip cookie to get that sensation taste in their mouth in the past, because you are in essence using the future to affect your decisions in the past. And we have shown through associative remote viewing that that can be done. And so you might have a specific scent that you like, that you're shown the target photo that's correct, and you'll smell that scent. So in the past, when you're doing your remote viewing, you're picking up the scent with the remote viewing sketches that you're doing to say, yeah, this is the right target. And then there's things called remote influencing. Uh, Ingo Swann had a very famous incident where Hal Puthoff took him down into the basement of a building in SRI, and they had a shielded magnetometer that was a quark detector that was buried in the ground, surrounded by concrete and metal, so that nothing could perturb it except for a quark. And Ingo or Hal asked Ingo, "Can you view the sensor?" And Ingo said, "Yes," and began viewing it, and the magnetometer went off. And he stopped viewing it, and the magnetometer started back to its single, just solid state. And Hal said, "Hey, do it again." Magnetometer started going up and down. "Go ahead and stop, Ingo." Magnetometer back to steady state. The scientists in charge of the magnetometer were rather irked and threw them out. That was Hal's indication that, why, yes, you can use this capability to affect things. Lynn Buchanan was famous for affecting electronics while he was in the military, affecting computer systems. And he also discovered that by doing remote influencing, this was part of him sending his decisions back in time. So he would use his decisions at a decision point to send back an influence to his past self to say, this is the decision you want to make, or this is something you don't want to make. And for him, it has, and other students that he has taught, it has been very successful. And then Glenn Wheaton, when we did IRVA annual conferences in Las Vegas, would take the viewers to various casinos, and they would remote influence the roulette wheels. So they would decide, well, we're going to have red come up a few times, and they would influence the roulette wheel to come up red. And of course, they didn't do that too often in the same casino, because then people started getting suspicious, and you don't want to get thrown out of the casino. But they were able to prove that, yes, you could use physical influencing to affect an outcome. So that's our journey through remote viewing. Uh, Anybody can learn to do it. The difference is it depends on how much effort you put into your practice and how what your innate talent is. Like I said earlier, using a golf example, everybody can learn how to play golf, but not everybody can be Tiger Woods. So everybody can learn to remote view, but not everybody is going to be a Joe McMoneagle or a Tom McNear or other great viewers. It is real and it works. We have substantiated by over 130 years of statistically provable, significant scientific study. And the key here is the results are testable and repeatable. And as I've shown you, there are numerous real-world applications to remote viewing. And this training is available around the world. It's available in your country. It's available in the United States. Uh, Talk to us and we will help you find an instructor. And I have to tell you that remote viewing can be a life changer. Once you find out that you can do this, you'll be amazed at what else you can do. I'd also like to throw in a pitch for our conference. We have an annual conference, and this year it's in Cloudcroft, New Mexico, which is right outside Alamogordo. And please go to our website to register. There's hotel suggestions there, and see the agenda. And I hope to see many of you there. And that's all I have. And there's my contact information. But as they say in the TV commercials, wait, there's more. And now it's your turn. We're going to do a remote viewing experiment, and you are going to be the viewer. So hold on, and we will describe what's going to happen to you and how you're going to participate. So again, thank you for listening, and hold on to your hats because you're going to have a great time.